Please welcome Congressman Brady.
George, thank you very much for the introduction. More importantly, thanks for being leadership of the chamber. This is a great chamber, is the voice of business in this area, and does a tremendous job. You succeed because throughout the years you've always attracted really great leadership to this board, to the committee chairman, to the volunteers of this chamber. So first, thank you for all that you've done throughout the years to make this region in this city the fastest growing city in America. That's no small feat. But basically making this such a great place to live and work and play and raise our kids. So thank you to you and the board. Brian, thanks for your leadership. As George mentioned, most of you know I was a Chamber of Commerce executive my whole adult life. So I did what Brian did, just not as well. So that's the difference. Brian, I'm glad you're doing a great job. Thanks for putting today together. And also I want to introduce you guys. Todd Stevens did a great job for us. Is our district director here in Texas for a number of years. Todd has gone to work for the Woodlands Community Association. Our new district director, who's just fabulous, Heather Washburn. Where's Heather? Right back there. And we also have with us Mary Cordes, who handles so much of our scheduling, a lot of our and then down from Washington, Jen Jett is my executive assistant. So when you wonder who scheduled every moment of my life for the past year on tax reform, that was the one. Jen is the one who handled it. So we're all breathing a little easier now. So I want to be real brief and take as many questions as I can. I want to talk about two things with your permission. Let's talk about this new tax code and what it means for you as families and especially for you as small businesses. And secondly, I want to talk about Hurricane Harvey relief. In a couple areas there I think are really important for us, for our community going forward. In fact, let's start with the second one. So we have passed 3 bills very quickly to provide relief for Hurricane Harvey. This was the largest natural disaster in American history. The whole country watched what Texans do together for neighbors. And it's so impressed the rest of the country. But as much as we've done, Judge, we can't do it all ourselves. To be able to rebuild and, more importantly, to put in place prevention so that we don't see these repeated floods is expensive. We're going to need the federal government to partner with us. And so we passed 3 bills into law that help us take those steps. But there's one that the House passed just before Christmas that I think is the most important one. What we did was the Texas delegation joined with the Florida delegation and doubled the size of Hurricane Harvey relief. It came from the White House at $41 billion, $44 billion. We turned it into an $81 billion recovery. And for the first time, Roy, we have nearly $15 billion for Texas. Most of it that can help us stop flooding in the future. Not just respond to this one, but actually put in place means to prevent flooding. And in that is the request from Montgomery County for a countywide regional watershed study so that we can figure out exactly what it takes to solve this going forward. And we all watch the water pouring out of Lake Conroe, but I think if you take the bigger view in Montgomery County, if you think about that, that was the same amount of water coming out of Niagara Falls, running through the county to Lake Houston. But at that same time, Rebecca, there were 5 flows, 5 equivalents of Niagara Falls, all rolling through Montgomery County, all landing and arriving at Lake Houston at the same time. There's the problem for us. And so the watershed study that the county has proposed, I think, is an awfully good start. And so that funding, which passed the House, is now in the Senate. Really important that it be taken up. I was frustrated with this government shutdown, absolutely needless, pointless, achieved nothing except for delaying Hurricane Harvey relief. And so now the Senate's going to be able to pick that up. So that study, I think, is really important. Secondly, in that bill is something that I led in the House, and Senator Cruz is leading in the Senate, which is, so we've been through all these hurricanes and floods, and small businesses are the ones who tend to take it on the chin. And usually the relief, other than property damage, is here, let us lend you more money. But for our small businesses, most can't go deeper in debt. You've got all the debt that you need. You need to be able to stay afloat so you can figure out how to rebuild. And sometimes it's just, Roy, as you know, your business goes away. You know what I mean? So it's just an interruption of cash flow. It makes it tough. And so it's always frustrated me that small businesses get basically loans other than property damage. So for the first time we asked for, in the House bill, we have a pilot program for Texas. Dollars that will come directly from Washington to the state level to be able to be used in grants to small businesses to help them make the decision to rebuild and restart again. I think in Katrina and Rita, we had 8,000 businesses in the region who just went away. We just never came back. A lot of them are small businesses in a big way. And so we're determined not to have that happen again. And so the House has a pilot program that we sent, that we worked with Brian with the Greater Houston Partnership, and the Governor's Office, Commissioner Bush, up in Austin, on this pilot program. Senator Cruz, to his credit, has really been making the case for it in the Senate as well. We're hopeful we can get that done, because I'm convinced if there's any state that can show the rest of the country how you help small business get back on their feet from a hurricane like that, it's us. We're entrepreneurial, we know how to get these dollars down to the community. I'm convinced this can help us. So I'm really eager for the Senate to pick up this bill, because I think, just thinking differently, thinking fresh, I think there's some good things we can do to help our businesses. And my little sister, Carol, runs the faith-based homeless program over in Lake Houston, Family Promise. It's really terrific, and she's on the board there. And along from Lake Houston and all that area, like us, they just saw tons of small businesses go under that haven't decided whether they're going to reopen or not. Let's get businesses in Montgomery County, north of Houston, and Houston, back open again. And I think that pilot program can help us do that. And so we can talk more about that. On tax reform, you know, George mentioned it, but you heard me talk about it so often. I'm tired of watching our U.S. businesses continue to move overseas. And I get frustrated. Main Street businesses have been fighting too hard just to survive. For most of America, while Texas is doing so much better, most of American families haven't seen a pay raise in nearly a decade. And if you've got kids coming out of school, you know, oftentimes there are not the jobs that they're eager to get when they get out of school. And most of that has come about because of our tax code. It was time to change it. And so when I took up this effort as chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, you know, I set two goals. One, I want a tax code built for growth, literally designed to grow jobs and paychecks in the U.S. economy. And the second goal is to leapfrog America from 31st in the world among our competitors into the lead pack as one of the top 3 best places on the planet for that next new job, that next new manufacturing plant, that next new research facility. So those two goals, growth and leapfrog to the lead around the world, drove every decision we made. And in the end, that's what we achieved. Now, there's no question, this isn't a perfect tax reform bill. There's plenty of things I would do differently, but man, we got the fundamentals right. So let's start with growth. So we knew our businesses in America have the highest tax rate literally in the world. Not only that, but we were one of the few countries that when CB&I, when companies at the industrial park compete around, when our energy companies compete around the world, not only do they have the highest rate, we taxed them to bring their earnings back to be reinvested in America. About one of the few countries that still do that. We stopped it. So we lowered the rate to 21%, one of the better rates in the country, in the world, and we basically said we should redesign the whole tax code so that companies, the tax rate, when our local businesses in Montgomery County compete and win around the world, Mexico, Canada, Europe, energy, the tax rate to bring those dollars to be back reinvested in Montgomery County is 0 going forward. So that's why you're starting to see businesses announce jobs coming back, research coming back, manufacturing coming back. In fact, one company that has a lot of presence in Texas, Assurant, had already announced earlier they were moving their headquarters to Bermuda. Well, 2 weeks ago they announced they're keeping it here in America. And those jobs here in Texas. So the early signs, I think, are encouraging from this. So we now have 3 million Americans who've already seen pay raise increases, bonuses, better 401k plans, better maternity leave than they did before. We have hundreds of companies now already who've announced that they're making new investments in the U.S. now. Half of all manufacturing companies that have been surveyed recently say they plan to expand in America because of the tax code and pay higher wages. All that's really encouraging. The new surveys of small business say that small business optimism is at the highest it's been in years. And for people looking for work, the optimism that they'll find a good paying job is at the highest level in 17 years. Those are all really encouraging early steps. But in the end, we redesigned this tax code so that America could grow in a major way for the long term, so that, as George said, our businesses, large or small, can compete and win anywhere in the world, especially here at home. And so long term, I think we're going to see new investments in the U.S. You're going to see companies make the long-term decision to bring those jobs and those manufacturing back to America. And as we've seen with Apple and a number of others, make new investments now here in the U.S. All that, I think, is incredibly important. Those are longer term, but really key for us to grow as a country. For small businesses, there's a number of new benefits here. One, and I think the most apparent, well, there's two, is that for the first time there'll be a 20% small business deduction off the new low tax rates. So for every type of business, regardless of what you are, for that first $315,000 of income, if you're not a C corporation, if you're designed, structured differently, you get a 20% discount off the lower tax rates, up to $315,000. Above that, there's sort of two ways you can keep that deduction. One is if you have workers. The other is if you put capital, invest back in your business and all, you keep that 20% deduction going up to much higher income levels. We did that because I noticed in studying all the tax reform America's done, it always seemed to me like our small businesses got left behind. We were determined not to let that happen this time. So that new 20% deduction we think is very important for Main Street businesses. But we didn't stop there. So for the first time in history, every business in America of any size will be able to immediately write off from their taxes their investment in plants, equipment, software, and technology. Not over 5 years, not over 10 years, not over 30 years, the year you buy it. One, it's really important for cash flow to be able to do that, but secondly, that's how we drive new equipment, new technology, new investments, Brian, in our Main Street businesses. To me, that may be the most pro-growth part of this whole tax reform, is what they call immediate expensing. That's just writing off from your taxes all that new equipment, technology, incredibly pro-growth for Main Street businesses and for communities like ourselves. There are a number of other provisions for small businesses we can go through as well. But for families, we think this is critically important as well. So for Texas, because we've redesigned the tax code, they estimate that Texas will see 81,000 new jobs here in Texas. That's the second highest job growth of any state in the country. Our average family in my 9 counties, George, 2 teachers in a family will see a tax cut of just about $3,000. Now I know in Washington they make fun of things like that. You know, they call it crumbs for people, but in truth, for hardworking families, $3,000, that's saving for college, it's utilities, it's payment on that old beater of a car, you need a new one. I mean, it matters, and it grows from there. We doubled the child tax deduction, and more importantly, because it's expensive to raise kids today. We have 2 teenagers, we know. But it's incredibly expensive, but we not only doubled it, but before, that child tax credit used to phase out, in other words, get smaller, if you made, as a family, $110,000. Well, now, it doesn't begin to phase out until your family makes $400,000. So for a lot of middle-class families, for the first time, they'll actually get some help raising their kids. We kept the charitable deduction, we make it a little bigger. We want you to give more, you know, to your church or to your or school or college you believe in. We kept the home mortgage deduction. It stays exactly as it is today in your current mortgage. In the future, it's limited to the first $750,000 of your mortgage, but a second home is included as well. So we think that in the college tax credits, we kept as well. So we think the really important parts of raising a family are reinforced, if not made better, in this new tax reform. Are there other changes? Yeah, there's tons of them. You can't lower taxes for all Americans. You can't, I was just getting going. You can't lower taxes for everyone, redesign the tax code, and keep everything the way it is. Can't do it. Math doesn't work. So yeah, we eliminated a number of provisions. You know, so there are trade-offs between lower tax rate and far more competitive, built for growth, leapfrogging type of tax reform, and all these provisions. So some of them may have affected you in this. We understand that. But this is why tax reform only gets done once every generation. It's incredibly hard to do it. I'm trying to think, final point. Here's what I think the most important part of this is. At the heart of tax reform is a simple question. Who decides? Who decides how you spend your money? Is it the government that decides, or is it you? You know, the reason you have such a high tax rate is really, I think the government wants first claim over most Americans' earnings. Our decision was, given the choice between the government deciding or you, we choose you. We have more faith that you know what to do with your earnings as a small business person, as a parent, as a taxpayer, than the government does. And the reason I think this is so important is that if Washington no longer has first claim over your earnings, it changes everything. It just changes everything. And so one of our biggest pushes was to try to lower the tax rate, help small businesses and families keep more of what they earn, and grow this economy in a way it hasn't seen. Every economic expert predicts that, or did predict, that the next 10 years would look a lot like the last 10 years, the slowest growth in half a century. We think we can do better in fixing this tax code and making it pro-growth, making America competitive again. We're convinced can change the economics, and it already is. We've got a lot of work to do. I'm going to need your help going forward because, and I should have said this at the very beginning, leading this tax reform effort was the greatest blessing of my life. It also was 10 times harder than anything I've done in my life. I thought of you often. Roy, we talked about the estate tax, the death tax. I thought of many of you often on the issues we've worked together on and the challenges for our businesses here in Conroe and Montgomery County as we redesigned this tax code. So you in this room already had a big impact on it, but you can do more. We're not done yet. I'm convinced there's still parts of this tax code we can improve. And I've already made it clear to our competitors in China and Europe and Canada and Mexico, we're not going to wait 31 years again. to redo this tax. We're not going to fall that far behind as a country again to our competitors. So you make changes to your tax code to become more competitive. We're going to make changes to the tax code to keep American businesses and our workers the most competitive in the world, period. So we got a lot more work to do. I'm going to need this chamber, you as community leaders, engage with me as we look for ways to continue to improve the tax code in a big way. With that, George, Brian, can I stop and take some easy questions, from these guys? No, only easy ones? Yeah.